That morning, the sky was a dull sheet of gray, pressing low over the city, as if it, too, was waiting for something to happen. I remember standing outside my apartment window, watching water slide down the glass in uneven lines, my reflection fractured and uncertain. 22 floors below, traffic moved like a slow pulse. Normal, predictable, safe. I clung to that feeling as I buttoned my shirt. Routine had become my armor lately. Wake up, shower, coffee I barely tasted, work, home, sleep, repeat. It was easier not to think that way, about the things I wanted, the things I hid. Easier not to remember the weight of certain looks, certain silences. And easier not to think about him. Dr. Amir Khan wasn't supposed to matter. He was just my physician, assigned after my company switched insurance providers. Professional, calm, always composed in that unsettling way that made me feel like he could see straight through the lies I told myself. Still, every appointment lingered with me longer than it should have. The clinic waiting room was quiet when I arrived, almost unnervingly so. No crying children, no murmured conversations, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic ticking of a clock mounted too high on the wall. I checked my phone, 10 minutes early. Of course I was. Mr. Arslan, the receptionist called without looking up. I stood, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my jeans, and followed her down the corridor. Each step echoed too loudly, my heartbeat sinking with the sound. Doors passed by in a blur of frosted glass and nameplates. Then we stopped. Doctor will see you now. The door closed behind me with a soft click that felt far too final. Dr. Khan stood by the window, back turned, hands folded behind him as he studied the rain outside. He wore his white coat like a second skin, effortless, precise. When he turned, his expression was neutral, but his eyes paused on me just a second longer than necessary. How have you been feeling? He asked. That question always felt loaded. Fine, I said automatically. Too quickly. He nodded, motioning for me to sit. As I did, I noticed something was off. A file open on his desk that wasn't mine. His pen resting at an odd angle. The calm, rehearsed rhythm between us felt fractured. As he asked routine questions, I sensed an undercurrent I couldn't name. His gaze lingered, then retreated. My own thoughts grew louder, intrusive. Was it just my imagination? Or had the air in the room shifted? When he finally stood and moved closer, lowering his voice, my pulse spiked. There's something we need to discuss, he said quietly. My throat went dry. He hesitated, actually hesitated, and in that pause, 100 unspoken possibilities bloomed and terrified me. What had he seen? What did he know? And why did it feel like this moment was about to crack something open that could never be sealed again? I nodded, unsure whether I was ready for the answer. Neither of us moved, and in the silence between us, I wondered, was this just another appointment, or the beginning of something dangerously irreversible? The days after that appointment slipped into a strange, fragile rhythm. On the surface, everything stayed the same. I woke before my alarm, watched the ceiling fan spin lazily, counted the cracks like I always did. Outside, the rain gave way to heavy, humid mornings, the kind that clung to your skin and refused to let go. Karachi summers had a way of pressing too close, of making even the smallest movements feel intimate. But underneath that routine, something had shifted. I caught myself thinking about Dr. Khan at odd moments, while brushing my teeth, while waiting at traffic lights, while lying awake at night listening to the distant horns and barking dogs. It wasn't desire exactly, not yet. It was curiosity laced with unease. That pause of his, the way his voice had softened, the way he hadn't finished his sentence. There's something we need to discuss. The words echoed like a threat I couldn't escape. A week passed before the clinic called again. This is just a follow-up, the receptionist said, cheerful and oblivious. Doctor requested it personally. Personally. I stared at my phone long after the call ended, my thumb hovering over the screen as if it might burn me. Doctors didn't request follow-ups personally. Not for patients like me. Not unless something was wrong. Or unless something had been noticed. The morning of the appointment, the sky was clear and painfully blue, as if mocking my nerves. Sunlight poured into my apartment, illuminating dust particles I usually ignored. My place felt too quiet. My roommate, Saad, had left early, no teasing remarks, no half-drunk mug left on the counter. The silence made my thoughts louder. I stood in front of the mirror longer than necessary. "You're being ridiculous," I muttered to my reflection. But my reflection didn't look convinced. At the clinic, the waiting room was busier this time, yet I felt more alone than before. A couple sat across from me, whispering to each other. An old man coughed into a handkerchief. Life going on, unbothered by the tight coil forming in my chest. When Dr. Khan finally called my name himself, heads turned. That alone should have warned me. His office felt warmer than I remembered, the curtains drawn halfway to filter the harsh sunlight. He gestured for me to sit, then closed the door with deliberate care. The click echoed louder than it should have. "You seem tense," he said, his tone professional, but his eyes, searching. "I'm fine," I replied again. The lie tasted stale. He sat across from me, folding his hands. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. Normal sounds. Normal place. Then he leaned forward slightly. "I reviewed your tests," he said. My stomach dropped. "And?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're normal," he continued, watching my reaction closely. "Perfectly normal." Relief flooded me so fast it almost hurt. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Then why?" "There's something else," he interrupted gently. There it was again. That something. He stood and walked to the window, repeating the same motion from our last appointment. Rain wasn't there this time. Just bright sun and passing clouds. His reflection appeared faintly in the glass, fractured like mine had been days before. "As a doctor," he said slowly, "I'm trained to notice patterns. Changes. Things patients don't mention." My pulse quickened. "Okay." He turned back to me, his expression conflicted. "You seemed uncomfortable last time. Not physically. Emotionally." The room felt smaller. "I deal with stress," I said, defensive. "Everyone does." "Yes," he agreed. But this felt different. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I shifted in my chair, my palms damp. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Had I said something? Looked at him wrong? Was this some kind of test? "You don't have to answer," he added quickly. "But if there's something affecting your well-being, it's my responsibility to ask." My responsibility. His responsibility. The words tangled together, blurring lines I'd spent years carefully drawing. I laughed softly, a sound that didn't match how I felt. "You're overthinking it, doctor." He didn't smile back. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe you're very good at hiding." That hit too close. My chest tightened, old memories stirring, locked doors, lowered voices, the constant awareness of being watched. I had learned early how to fold myself into something acceptable. How to survive. "I should go," I said, standing abruptly. He didn't stop me, but his voice followed me. "Arslan." He had never used my first name before. I froze. "If you ever want to talk," he continued, carefully measured, "about anything, my door is open." I nodded without turning around and left before my composure could crack. Outside, the heat slammed into me, unforgiving. I walked without direction, letting the crowd carry me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. My mind replayed every word, every look. "You're very good at hiding." That night, sleep refused to come. The ceiling fan creaked rhythmically above me, its sound uneven, like a heartbeat skipping. At some point, I heard a knock, or thought I did. Soft, distant. When I sat up, listening, there was nothing. The next few weeks blurred together, threaded with unease. I noticed Drive Khan everywhere after that. In my thoughts, in my dreams. Sometimes I imagined conversations we never had, confessions neither of us dared to voice. Other times, I convinced myself I'd made it all up, that he was just doing his job, and I was projecting something dangerous onto a neutral situation. Then came the message, an email from the clinic, brief and formal, requesting another visit. No explanation, no tests mentioned. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. This wasn't routine anymore. The day of the appointment, the sky darkened unexpectedly, clouds rolling in like a warning. As I entered the clinic, the lights flickered once, then steadied. A strange omen, my mind whispered. Dr. Khan's door was already open. Inside, his coat hung on the chair instead of his shoulders. His tie was loosened. He looked human, less guarded. Close the door, he said quietly when he saw me. I hesitated, just a fraction of a second, then obeyed. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he walked to his desk and picked up a file. Not my medical file, something thinner, personal. There are boundaries, he began, his voice low. Rules I'm not supposed to cross. My throat tightened. But there are also moments, he continued, meeting my eyes, when pretending not to see something becomes a kind of dishonesty. The room felt charged, like the air before a storm. My pulse thudded in my ears. What are you saying? I asked, barely above a whisper. He took a step closer, then stopped, as if reminding himself of an invisible line. I'm saying, he replied, carefully, that whatever you're carrying, you're not as alone as you think. His words weren't explicit. They didn't need to be. Something passed between us, an understanding, fragile and dangerous. I felt exposed, seen in a way that terrified me more than being invisible ever had. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, and as the first drops of rain hit the window, I realized this wasn't just about a doctor and a patient anymore. It was about a truth pressing hard against the surface. And I didn't know what would happen when it finally broke through. It fell harder as the hours passed, drumming against the clinic windows with a persistence that made it impossible to ignore. By the time Drive, Khan closed the file in his hands, the sound had become almost violent, as if the sky itself was demanding a confession. Neither of us spoke. I could feel my pulse in my throat, in my wrists, in the hollow space behind my ribs. The room felt smaller than before, the walls pressing inward. His words, "You're not as alone as you think," hung between us, unfinished and dangerous. This isn't appropriate, I said finally, though my voice betrayed me. It wasn't firm. It wasn't convincing. It was the kind of protest whispered more to myself than to him. He exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath for days. I know. Yet he didn't move away. The silence stretched. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang. Footsteps passed the door, then faded. The world continued, indifferent to the tightrope we were both standing on. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound made me flinch. I should leave, I said again. You've said that before, he replied quietly. I turned toward him, frustration rising like heat under my skin. Then stop looking at me like that. His jaw tightened. Like what? Like you already know, I snapped. Like you've decided something for me. For a moment, I thought I'd gone too far. His expression hardened, and guilt punched through me. I had come here willingly. I had stayed, and now I was blaming him for feelings I'd spent my whole life burying. I'm sorry, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. This is just a lot. He nodded. It is. He finally stepped back, creating space between us, and the loss of his proximity felt sharper than it should have. He moved toward his desk, resting his hands on its edge, grounding himself. There's something I need to tell you, he said. The words sent a jolt through me. My chest tightened again, anticipation and fear tangling together. Every instinct I have says I should end this conversation, he continued. Refer you to another doctor. Pretend this discomfort never existed. And yet, I asked, hating how much I wanted him to continue. And yet, he said softly, that would be a lie. My breath caught. He looked at me then, not as a doctor assessing a patient, not as a professional maintaining distance, but as a man stripped of his armor. Vulnerable. Human. I see you, he said. And I recognize that look because I've worn it myself. That stopped me cold. You. The word came out sharper than intended. His lips curved into a humorless smile. You think you're the only one who learned how to disappear. The room tilted slightly, as if the floor had shifted under my feet. Suddenly, the dynamic between us felt different, less one-sided, less controlled. You don't know anything about me, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Then tell me, he replied. Thunder cracked outside, loud enough to make me jump. The lights flickered again, briefly plunging the room into semi-darkness before stabilizing. My heart hammered wildly. This was the moment, I realized. The edge of something I couldn't undo. I can't, I said. If I say it out loud, it becomes real. He took a step closer, careful, deliberate. Some truths exist whether we name them or not. I laughed softly, bitterly. You make it sound so easy. It isn't, he said. That's why I'm terrified right now. The admission sent a strange rush through me. Fear recognized fear. For the first time, I wasn't alone in it. Do you know how many times I've imagined this going differently? I confessed, the words spilling out before I could stop them. A doctor who doesn't look twice. A room that doesn't feel charged. A life where I don't have to measure every glance. He listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving mine. And yet you're here, he said. Yes, I replied. And that's the problem. I stepped back, creating distance this time. My hands trembled slightly. If we cross this line, there's no pretending afterward. He nodded slowly. I'm aware. The air between us felt electric, heavy with everything unsaid. My mind screamed warnings. This could ruin him. This could ruin you. This is wrong. And yet my body refused to move toward the door. Instead, I asked, why me? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Because you didn't ask to be seen, and that's exactly why you deserve to be. Something in my chest cracked. The rain intensified, blurring the world outside the window until it looked like a watercolor bleeding into itself. Time felt suspended, stretched thin. He raised his hand slightly, stopping just short of touching me. If you want me to stop, say it. I searched myself for the word. For the strength. For the certainty. I found none. I don't know what I want, I admitted. That's okay, he said. Neither do I. His hand lowered, brushing against mine, barely, accidentally, a contact so light it could have been dismissed as nothing. It wasn't nothing. Every nerve in my body flared, my breath hitching involuntarily. I pulled my hand back immediately, panic surging. We can't, I whispered. I know, he echoed. But neither of us moved away. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, counting down something invisible. A choice, a collapse, a beginning. Finally, footsteps approached outside the door, voices, laughter, the mundane intrusion of reality. The spell broke. Dr. Khan stepped back at once, straightening his posture, donning the mask I'd seen so many times before. I felt exposed, raw, like I'd been caught in the middle of a confession. You should go, he said, his tone carefully neutral. I nodded, grateful and devastated all at once. As I reached for the door, he spoke again. Arslan. I turned. This doesn't end here, he said quietly. Not a promise. Not a threat. Just a truth. My hand hovered on the handle. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because as I stepped back into the corridor, heart racing, one thought burned brighter than the rest. If this was only the breaking point, what would happen when we finally crossed it? I walked until my legs ached, until the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white against the wet roads. The rain had softened into a mist, clinging to my hair, my clothes, my thoughts. Every step felt delayed, as if part of me was still standing in that room, under fluorescent lights, with a hand that had almost touched mine. Almost. That was the word that haunted me. At home, the apartment felt cussed, foreign. Too neat, too quiet. Saad still wasn't back. His absence pressed on me harder than noise ever could. I dropped my keys onto the counter and stood there, staring at nothing, my chest tight. This doesn't end here, Dr. Khan's voice replayed in my head, stripped of its professionalism, heavy with implication. Not a confession, not a rejection, something worse, something unfinished. I slept badly that night. Dreams came in fragments. A door that wouldn't open. A voice calling my name from behind a wall. Waking up felt like surfacing from deep water, disoriented, breathless. Morning light crept through the curtains, too bright, too honest. The next few days passed in a haze. I checked my phone too often. Every vibration made my heart jump. Every email from an unknown sender felt like a threat. But nothing came. No message. No call. Silence. And somehow, that silence felt deliberate. At work, I caught myself staring at my screen without seeing it. Conversations blurred. Laughter from coworkers felt distant, unreal. I wondered if anyone could see it on my face, that something had shifted, that a line I didn't even know existed had been crossed. Or almost crossed. On the fourth day, the clinic called again. This time, there was no pretense of routine. Dr. Khan asked if you could stop by today, the receptionist said. After hours. After hours. My mouth went dry. Is something wrong? A pause. He didn't say. Of course he didn't. I arrived just before closing. The waiting room was empty, chairs aligned with sterile precision. The lights were dimmer, the air cooler. The clock ticked loudly, each second stretching thin. His office door was ajar. I knocked lightly anyway. Come in, he said. He wasn't wearing his white coat. That small detail hit me harder than anything else. He stood by his desk, sleeves rolled up, tie gone, as if he'd shed layers along with the day. The room felt different without the armor of professionalism. More honest. More dangerous. You didn't have to come, he said. Yes, I did, I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. We stood there, a careful distance between us. The hum of the building settling for the night filled the silence. Somewhere, a cleaning cart rattled faintly. I shouldn't have said what I said, he began. My chest tightened. Which part? All of it. I nodded slowly, bracing myself. Okay, but, he continued, and that single word unraveled everything again. I couldn't let it sit between us. Neither could I realized. He walked to the window, resting his forehead briefly against the glass. The gesture felt intimate, unguarded. I've spent my life choosing the safe option, he said. The correct one, and it's cost me more than I like to admit. I watched him, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands curled slightly as if holding back. Why tell me this? He turned. Because you walked out of here carrying something I helped create. That landed with a quiet weight. We stood there, suspended, until he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a file. Not opening it, just holding it. I'm transferring your case, he said. Effective immediately. The words hit like a slap, and a relief, at the same time. Oh, I said softly. This is me choosing responsibility, he added. And honesty. I swallowed. And what about everything else? He met my gaze. That's the part one don't have an answer for. He stepped closer, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel his presence. My breath caught despite myself. This is where it has to stop, he said quietly. I searched his face for certainty and found only conflict mirroring my own. And if it doesn't? I asked. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Then we both lose something we can't afford. The air felt heavy again, charged with all the things we weren't doing, weren't saying. His hand twitched at his side, a restrained impulse. I felt it too, the pull, the ache, the forbidden gravity. In the end, it was the smallest thing that broke me. He reached out, not to touch me, but to straighten a crease in my shirt, stopping just short, as if catching himself at the last second. I'm sorry, he whispered. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. When I left, the hallway lights dimmed automatically behind me, one by one, like doors closing. Outside, the night air was cool, sharp, grounding. As I walked away, one question pulsed louder than the rest. Had we just done the right thing, or only delayed the moment it all fell apart? Dr. Khan vanished from my life in the most clinical way possible, no drama, no explanation. A new doctor's name appeared on my appointment list. Different office, different floor, different voice asking the same questions with none of the weight behind them. Everything was correct, ethical, clean. And yet, nothing felt resolved. I stopped checking my phone so obsessively, but I still noticed every unfamiliar number. I stopped replaying our last conversation word for word, at least, I told myself I did. In truth, it surfaced in quieter moments, while washing dishes, while waiting at red lights, while lying awake as the city exhaled around me. At work, I was sharper than usual. Quieter. People asked if I was okay, and I smiled and said yes with the ease of someone well practiced in lying. Saad eventually returned to his normal habits, noise, jokes, borrowed clothes, but even he studied me sometimes, like he sensed something unspoken lodged under my ribs. You sure you're good? He asked one night, leaning against my doorframe. Yeah, I said. Just tired. He nodded, unconvinced, and let it go. That was the pattern now. Everyone let it go, except me. Once, in a crowded mall, I thought I saw him. The same height, the same posture. My heart surged painfully before reason caught up. It wasn't him. It never was. Still, the reaction lingered, leaving me shaken at how little it took to undo my composure. What disturbed me most wasn't longing. It was recognition. Being seen, even briefly, even dangerously, had changed something fundamental. I couldn't unlearn the feeling of someone understanding the parts of me I'd kept hidden, not just from others, but from myself. The idea settled uncomfortably in my chest. Maybe safety wasn't the same as peace. One evening, as I sorted through old emails, I found a notification I'd missed weeks earlier. Sent at 2:17 a.m. No subject line, just a system-generated address from the hospital network. Your physician assignment has been updated. That was all, but attached was a name in the footer. Not as my doctor, not officially, just a name. I stared at it longer than I should have. I didn't respond. I didn't know how, or if I was supposed to. The restraint between us still held, thin, taut, deliberate. Yet its presence felt louder now than any contact ever could have. Outside, the city hummed as usual. Somewhere, a call to prayer drifted faintly through the air, grounding and unsettling all at once. Life continued to demand normalcy. But inside me, something waited. Not for him, exactly. For a reckoning. Because if a single, almost touch could unravel years of careful control, what would happen if our paths crossed again without rules to stop us? And more terrifying still, would I choose differently next time? The sky was pale, washed-out blue, the kind that made the city look softer than it really was. A warm breeze slipped through my half-open window, carrying the distant sound of traffic and someone shouting for chai on the street below. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, counting my breaths like I always did when my thoughts felt too loud. In, out, in, out. Routine kept me steady. It always had. I showered, dressed, checked my reflection longer than necessary. Not because I liked what I saw, but because I needed to make sure nothing about me gave anything away. That was a habit I'd learned young. Straight shoulders, neutral expression, control. By the time I locked my apartment door, I felt calm again. Almost. The clinic sat at the corner of a quiet street, its white walls glowing under the late morning sun. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of disinfectant and something metallic. A clock ticked loudly behind the reception desk, marking time with unsettling precision. I signed in, sat down, waited. That's when I noticed the silence. No murmured conversations, no ringing phones, just the hum of electricity and the sound of my own pulse in my ears. I shifted in my chair, suddenly aware of my body in a way I didn't like. The way my foot bounced. The way my hands clenched together. Relax, I told myself. It's just an appointment. Arslan. I looked up. Doctor. Amir Khan stood in the doorway, clipboard tucked under his arm. Clean cut. Composed. The kind of man people trusted without question. His eyes met mine, and for a brief second, so brief I could have imagined it, something flickered there. Recognition. Curiosity. I followed him down the corridor, my footsteps echoing too loudly. The walls were lined with closed doors, each one hiding conversations I'd never hear, truths that weren't mine to know. His office was at the end. Have a seat, he said. I did. The room felt too neat. Too controlled. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, slicing the space into sharp lines. He asked routine questions, his voice steady, practiced. I answered just as mechanically. But beneath it all, something felt off. I noticed how often he paused. How his gaze lingered just a fraction longer than necessary before returning to his notes. How the air seemed thicker, heavier, with every minute that passed. You're overthinking, I told myself. Still, when he finally looked up and closed the file, my chest tightened. There's something I want to discuss, he said. My stomach dropped. The word something stretched between us, undefined and dangerous. I waited for him to continue, my mind racing through possibilities, diagnosis, warning, mistake. Instead, he hesitated. That hesitation unsettled me more than any bad news could have. Outside, a sudden gust rattled the window panes. Inside, neither of us moved. Say something, I thought. Anything. But I stayed silent, because some moments feel like standing on the edge of a cliff, aware that whatever comes next will change the shape of everything that follows. And I didn't yet know whether I was about to fall, or step forward willingly.